One of the things that we can now explore, having looked at some of the main expressions of a pattern in the more recent past with the high facilitators and Peter Sandhill, with the older past of Peter Sandhill, and with the deep past in the parental and cultural patterns, as we can start to see the thread. And what's important from my perspective, because while there's one level where this has been my life, there's another level where I understand with complete clarity that it's not personal. In other words, that this is our life. That each of you, that each of us, to one degree or another, at one time or another, has had some part of ourself wrapped up and wrapped up and wrapped up until it can't speak, until it goes insane. And then that part has been buried. And then its existence has been denied. And then the symptoms of its absence are unrecognized. And those symptoms are shamed and wrapped. And a dizzying array of confusing and splintered and disintegrated parts are left alone in a room in a cacophony of confused and muddled tones. And the consciousness of an individual is left there. I think of Alzheimer's. I think of the many ways that we as a culture fragment the self, pit one self against the other, confuse and disorient. And then, in the greatest crime of all, lay the burden of responsibility on the individual for this occurring, when so often it takes place before identity, before language, as a new identity is formed, and in headwinds that an individual does not yet have the muscle to push through. I consider myself very strong in the areas of awareness, pattern analyzing, language, and freedom. When I was 12 years old and evaluating the Christian God that I had been given and my own sense of divinity, I left the known circle to take a stake and a stand for a God, goddess that I could believe in, a God, goddess that was worthy of bowing to, of honoring, of seeking to become, and gave up a God that I had been terrorized by, and that did not seem worthy of allegiance. When I was 14 and evaluating what I was learning and how I was learning it in school, I considered that half of what I was learning was irrelevant to my well-being, and the remaining half was being taught in such a way that 80% of my time was being wasted. This, in and of itself, was not a crime or terribly upsetting, but the fact that all of my time needed to meditate, my time needed to journal, my time needed to do yoga, my time needed to read, my time needed to reflect, to write poetry, that this time was being stolen. This valuable time was being stolen by this mediocre time, which was being imposed to such an extent that I had no energy, no thought, no psychic will at the end of being drained in this way to do things far more important. And I consulted teachers, parents, and every adult that seemed worth consulting. And every single adult said, this is a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea to leave school. Don't do it. And I asked them why. Why? Are you thinking about the equation? Do you understand why I think this is a good idea? And the pivot point for me came when I realized that the answers that I was receiving were not as thoughtful as my own thought process. So why would you do what a bunch of people say to do if they're not even thinking about the question with as much care as you are? It means their answers from such a careless assessment are not that important. And I did leave school, and I did form a curriculum. Grounded imagination was one of my most valuable topics. How to scan thousands of possibilities and then look for cohesion. Look for cohesion between what could be done, what could be done efficiently, what was valuable to do, what inspired and spoke to me to do, what was needed, to look at the different way to weave those possibilities together. And this has always worked well for me. And I have encountered many, many choice points since that first choice at age 12, since that most major of choices to design my own school system that had no diploma, that had no finishing date, that I never want to end. And watching the divergence of my path and the many, and watching the higher returns on my investments relative to the many, and watching the many turn away again and again and again from my path of thought and my path of choice, has left me aware of my strength in analysis and my strength in courage, clarity, and will to go a different way. My biggest sadnesses in life have been the cost that I analyze of a world that runs wildly against what seems intelligent from a direct analysis of what I consider the most important question. How can a given set of resources, a given number of hours, a given amount of money, a given amount of natural resources, skills, and potential be organized to create the most amount, the biggest volume of sustainable human well-being relative to all the options. This will never take you down a normal path. One of my teachers has said that in the history of humankind, the majority has never been correct. In the history of humankind, the majority has never been correct. By objectifying these experiences, by taking a hidden world, a pattern, an alchemical event, and externalizing it into an object that other people can relate to, this can help you see the pattern in your life. It can help you see how it plays out, its impact. Because this is what is most terrifying to me, having spent my life relatively comfortable in my own spheres of influence in doing this, whether it's building my first house on time, on budget, with 1/20th of the stress that I saw most people building their houses over budget and not on schedule. And knowing that the difference is not me. I have no more energy than anyone else, often less. I have no easier time. The amount of energy that I spend coping with a variety of things is enormous. But I'm willing to do it differently. I'm willing to look at the patterns, see where the faults are, and do it differently. And I have been sucked in to the dark side of this pattern more thoroughly than I would like, more thoroughly than I would have assumed. And I speak about my strengths not to lift myself up, but rather because they are there. And it's important to know, from my perspective, on our behalf, that if these things can happen to me, if I can have 3 near-death experiences in the last few years, in the reverberations of these events, in the interference pattern created by any object in its reality, these events are dangerous to all of us, and we need to see them. We need to have lighthouses on the sharp rocks that ships are being wrecked on in our emotional and psychological terrain. And most of all, we cannot be lured accidentally by our own ignorance, by the ignorance of our leaders, of our guides, who don't know and have not mapped out some of the rocks they are asking our ships to cross. We need patient, loving, caring leaders that love and care enough to map out the terrain before guiding us through it. And so this, in some ways, is a metaphysical object becoming a scientific object, so that the rocks can be mapped, so that other ships can steer around them, and so that I can learn. In the 10 books that I have created over the last 10 years, it's always been with a sense that something I'm experiencing or seeing is important, and I want to remember it. I want to see it more clearly. And the only way that I know how to do that in a world in which almost no one wants to sit down and talk for hours and hours, to explore the nuances of what I'm seeing so that I can remember them, so that I can share them with them. When many people don't grasp the relevance of a pattern to their lives, or don't want to explore something that deeply, I can sit down and write and get to a sense of understanding of what it is that I'm witnessing and experiencing. And then the bonus, the other reason I love to write, is once I've done that to my satisfaction, it's there in an object form, and I don't like repeating myself. And then I can just share a link. I can just give a title. And anyone who wants to can go down that journey. Let's look at this pattern now that we've all looked at a few of the facts. There are some important things missing. But let's look at the pattern. So Peter gains confidence because of the success of the high workshops. the high workshops do not prepare me to speak in this language. They don't prepare me to understand what the real issue is, and so they are scary. The day before, about a third of my 30 high workshops, my back would go into spasm. And I would participate in the workshop in a back spasm, with my back screaming that not all the information that's related to my well-being in this workshop is conscious. But there are some things going on that are not safe, and that I don't know what they are. So that's a wake up, to be a little bit more conscious, to move a little slower. A reminder that some part of me is not being supported at these events. And I would look at that pattern, and I understand it. And I'd say, yeah, there probably is. But there is still measurable good stuff happening in these workshops. And so I will go anyway. And maybe one day I will discover what it is that my back is so terrified about. I believe what I'm exploring in this terrain is the source of that back spasm. Exploring this terrain in this way, watching this video prior to doing my first high event, would have served me well, would have served the community well, because it's not just my energy, it's not just my terror, it's not just my shame and my panic that has been exercised and triggered and vibrating beneath the surface. It's everyone who came in contact with me. Enormous amounts of energy on all sides, from the team, the facilitators, the participants, go into respecting or reacting to or navigating around an invisible object. But this object is not mine, it is ours. This object belongs to all of us, in our culture, our country, our community, in our protocols, in our workshops, in our therapy. It belongs to all of us. And it does not serve us to place it, to associate it too much with any one given individual. One of the great frustrations I have as a sensitive person is that as a sensitive person, I am more like water, and thus take the shape of the patterns that have the most energy associated with them. I'm the person that if there's a pink elephant in the room that everyone's looking away from, I will step into it. I'm most likely to talk about it. I'm most likely to assume the shape of that pink elephant so I know what's going on, so I can see why is there this disturbance in the space right here. And this is a gift, because the pink elephant is ours. It is a gift in an enlightened circle that understands the role of a sensitive, to bring light on hidden patterns. but it is an enemy of an unenlightened circle. Because in an unenlightened circle, it is the sensitive that becomes the scapegoat. Oh, good, you're the one willing to wear that hat. I don't like that feeling in me. I was thinking maybe it was me. Oh, good, I'm glad it's you. It's you. Thank heaven, now get out of my life. Now that I can get rid of you, I can get rid of this uncomfortable feeling. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And an untrained sensitive will be confused by this and believe, oh, it was me. It was me. I'm the bad one. Untrained sensitives are in a sick culture are among the most unhappy people in this world, because they're providing a service for everyone else that they're being punished for rather than being honored for. And they don't have the training to understand that most of the energy they're expressing and feeling is not their own. It often originates from much less sensitive people on the outside. And most of what a sensitive will feel and express, because it has the highest charge around it, is the most politically incorrect stuff. So it's very easy to scapegoat a sensitive. And yet 10% of our population are sensitives. In many of the mammals studied, there is a significant minority that serves the community by being different, by being sensitive. And Hai did not educate me about my sensitivity or that role. And one of the most difficult interference patterns that I ran in my early workshops was finding that I was feeling these uncomfortable forces in the room, and that I was saying the most uncomfortable things that I was feeling. And that these were the very things that no one wanted to have coming from their mouth. And that I, having said them, was marginalized, objectified as the source of the politically incorrect, and marginalized. And this is not the role, the healthy role of a fool, of a sensitive, the innocent one who looks in the mirror and says what they see, rather than what is politically correct to see, is to break the illusion, to break the spell, to bring reality. It's why a wise king would never be without their fool. But it takes training that we don't have. But let's talk about the pattern. I trusted all of the facilitators in their recommendation to go to Peter Sandhill, without asking any questions that would help Peter see me, see who I am, see the objects in my space, see the imbalances, and see the wounds and the dis-eases mentally, emotionally, and physically that I was dealing with. Peter quickly used his influence to exacerbate those imbalances in dangerous ways, to lead me directly into re-triggering traumatic terrain without telling me what trauma was, without helping me deal with trauma, without helping me understand it. In doing so, he crossed numerous boundaries of safety without him realizing it or me consciously understanding it, because so many of our coping strategies are unconscious. We need them to cope, but we don't understand why, and we don't understand what they are helping us cope with. Those objects have been made taboo in the culture to talk about. The reactions in the space, the reactions to these boundaries being crossed, to Peter using his guidance and energy to create a momentum towards dangerous arenas that destroyed coping strategies, that took me into turbulent emotional terrain. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that someone growing up as an American man in my generation has hugely traumatic feelings about homosexuality or bisexuality. So to just steer right into that terrain without examining what the baggage is, what's been internalized, how high the fear is, what muscles in the body is it stored in, is careless. It's like driving into a nuclear waste facility and banging into objects without recognizing they're there. Charging someone money to explore a sexual relationship with them takes you squarely into prostitution, another highly charged. See, I'm not talking about the fact that these are right or wrong. I'm not talking about the fact that homosexuality is healthy or unhealthy, or that prostitution is right or wrong, healthy or unhealthy. What I'm saying is that a child growing up in a culture that does not have the maturity to handle these topics, that violently attacks and abuses people who get too near these topics, who arrests people. I mean, being put in prison is a traumatic event. And for a sensitive, that much more so. And yet we think that's right in ways that don't feel right to me. We go so far in this country, if you've watched some of the prison documentaries, of prosecutors being paid kickbacks for sending juveniles in our country to prison for things as small as stealing an apple, or, it's a joke. It's a joke, and it's on us. These are not safe environments for a healthy human being, and not for a sensitive. So when you push someone in that, you haven't helped them understand they are a sensitive. You haven't trained them as a sensitive. You haven't helped them see trauma. You haven't helped them respond to trauma. You haven't helped them see their coping mechanism for dealing with trauma. You haven't taken any readings to see the intensity, the volatility of emotions around different topics, and you steer, right into homosexuality and prostitution. And you do it in a usurious way. It's not, would this be good for you? What would work best for you? It's, here's what's good for me. Now pay my bill. And when you add the insanity level, I love you. I love you. Now pay my bill. For taking you into dangerous terrain without preparing you. For taking you up a mountain peak that you were not skilled enough to climb, that's beyond your muscle capacity. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. And then, when it gets too much, when the relationship splinters, because it becomes clear it's not attuned to my well-being. Okay, off you go then. You can find your way down the mountain on your own. I've done my job. Next. Up the mountain and left there. See, the issue is not just some trauma, some hurt, some confusion, some insanity, some shame, some anger, some confusion about why I'm angry, some confusion about why I'm hurt, some confusion about why I don't trust, feeling that I'm even worse than I was before. The issue is not just that. The issue is that with a trained, skilled healer, that wouldn't have happened. That real help would have been done. The issue is the lost opportunity. The issue is not, as I said, just that half of what I'm learning in school is being learned half as effectively as I could learn it at home. And the other half is completely irrelevant. The issue is what it's taking me away from. The issue is that a skilled healer would have done an intake form. It's the most logical thing to do. I'm a contractor. I give my clients a 6-page questionnaire, and I refuse to give them any advice until we go over their written answers to that questionnaire. And I understand them, and I'm clear that they understand themselves. And then I reference their answers in my advice. I say, given that you've put a 10 on low maintenance, and you've put a 6 on getting what you want, what you're telling me is that if there's a conflict between what you want and what's low maintenance, we should steer towards low maintenance. Does that make sense to you? And if they say yes, then I say, okay, well, given these 5 choices here, this is the lowest maintenance choice. And it has this lifespan, these repercussions, this budget. Would you like to do that? And if they say yes, that's what we do in partnership together. And it works. It works. And there's no way that I could do that without an intake form. Absolutely none. I saw that in my first couple of jobs. It's not normal for contractors to have an intake form. But things I did what was normal. Things went wrong. I thought, this is a joke. How was I supposed to know that if they didn't tell me and I didn't ask? Well, I'm the professional. It's my job to ask. I don't care what other contractors are doing. I don't care what other designers are doing. I don't care about anything but making sure that my clients get what they want, what they say they want, what they would do if they had my mind and my skill and my training, but their values. That's what we're going to do. And I don't care what they ask me to do. If what they ask me to do is at odds with what's important to them, it's my job to educate them. It's my job to have a look around and say, well, wait a minute, let's see how your soil's doing. You want me to plant this plant, but you don't have the soil for it. This plant is not going to do very well. We've got to put soil here. We've got to do irrigation. We've got to mulch it. And this plant is not going to, unless we prune this tree around here, this plant isn't going to grow very well. I don't care about what you want. I care about you succeeding at what you want. And I have to figure that out. And I have to do research, or I'm going to fail at my goal of being of service. And I don't think gardens or homes are half as important as human beings and their hearts. Our growth, our spirits, the most important thing on this planet as a human spiritual being is our relationships with people. And I am in conflict with the high facilitators right now because they are not caring enough. They are not caring as much for my well-being, emotionally, mentally, or physically, as I care for a garden, a $5,000 to $10,000 garden, a $100,000 garden. We are priceless human beings. And we deserve that level of respect. And it doesn't begin with a word. I can't go to my clients and say, I love you, your plants are dying, your this are dying, whatever, but I love you. It's not meaningless. I don't even say it. My love is the attention to detail in communication, in contract, from preparation. My love is preparing a 6-page questionnaire that I've spent hours writing and rewriting over the years to get what and adding to. I've recently added a value hierarchy questionnaire because I realized that while everyone likes low maintenance and everyone wants what they want and everyone wants to save money and everyone wants to help the environment and everyone wants their partner to be happy, that some people want it more than others. Some people, it's a 10 out of 10 real estate value return on investment. Other people, it's a 4. Some people, it's a 10 out of 10, they get what they want. Other people, that's a 4. It's a 10 out of 10 to save money. And I need to know that. And they need to know that. Or they may not get what they want. So I've just recently added that in the last few years. And then there's things that people don't know that they don't know. And so I've written a book to tell them all the things they don't know. And I invite them to read the book. And I give it to them for free ahead of the time. And they benefit. It took me 3 months to write the book, but all of my clients are benefiting. And again, a garden is not as important as a human being. But it is important because it's for human beings. There's no documentation, there's no questionnaire, so Peter doesn't know what he doesn't know. He doesn't know what rocks he's asking me to sail through in order to maintain my relationship with him. And as things deep under the water start to rupture, as I start to take on water, because I've trusted Peter, because he said he's the professional, because he says he knows, as I start to take on water, my trust, my desire to be loved, the name, I love you, is still there. So we now have a divided self. We have one self that wants to follow Peter and this word of love. We have another self that is saying, I'm not safe here. We've now divided the self. The path of healing and strength is integration. The path of dis-ease, conflict, and weakness is fragmentation. It's when you take an individual and you splice them in such a way that they fall into many pieces that can't, within an unhealthy environment, function as one. So that's happening. And it's happening as I'm being weakened. So I'm being weakened internally, and I'm being weakened externally. I'm spending money and time. And the opportunity is being missed. This is being presented to me. This is the professional. And it's got good credentials because the workshops work so well. And I feel like there's an ethical responsibility by the facilitator body to honor the gift that Stan has given them. The scripts are what is impeccable about the workshop. The scripts and the protocols, which are 1,000 times better than the scripts and protocols that any of the facilitators use on their own. But the facilitator's work is riding on the reputation they are associated with as a result of the quality of work that is done within very good scripts and protocols. I mean, blind spots around trauma, blind spots around sensitivity, not empowering individuals in those areas. It would take an hour for any one facilitator to put that questionnaire and recommended reading into an intake form. An hour. And 60,000 people would know if they were sensitive or not, would learn about it, that they even exist, whether they have childhood trauma or not, what is trauma, what books to read if they do, rather than almost no one. Certainly rather than my ignorance and the more than 1,000 interactions that I've had, which some of them could go a lot more smoothly when the person on the other side of me knows what they're dealing with, and when I know what I'm dealing with. What I consider to be the most important thing in all of this is to protect the individual from self-blame, from self-shame, from despair, from self-loathing, and from isolation as a result of not understanding some of the blind spots and what is needed, and that they can, that there's, well, first of all, it's very empowering to know that there's nothing wrong with an individual. You know, that at a self level, nothing that someone is dealing with is innately theirs. And that to the degree that there is sickness and all of this is to the degree that they've had the misfortune of being programmed in a culture with this level of blind spot. And as I say, the biggest blind spot of all, and my biggest passion for making this body of work, is the fact that it is very easy when the quote experts, when the quote good guys, when the quote teacher, when the therapist, when the facilitator doesn't know and doesn't know they don't know, and therefore doesn't own the inadequacy or the wound or the dis-ease that is present, that is being embodied. And I'm just talking about a pattern. I'm talking about a pattern of ineffectiveness that must be placed somewhere. Meaning if someone is in pain, mentally, emotionally, physically, there is a failure, given that ultimately we would all like to be in a state of well-being, and we would all like to see other people in a state of well-being. And so if someone can't relate or can't connect in this area, or there's a failure in technology, a failure in complex understanding, a failure in perception. There's a lack of mastery that is present in the space. And the question is, where does that belong? And I believe that to a large extent it belongs everywhere. That it is ineffective to overburden individuals, and that's one of our biggest blind spots. But in practical terms, it's whatever works. But in my case, it certainly didn't work to not know. See, these blind spots were exacerbated by, again, a lack of tracking. Because had Peter, for example, asked me about the majority of my personal growth work before working with him, I'd have said, well, with Lazarus. He said, who's Lazarus? This channeled entity. Well, what did you learn there? Well, I learned that I create my own reality and this and that. And how's that working for you? Like, can you create this? No, I can't. How's that feel? It's miserable. I grew up with these parents saying all these horrible things to each other and this and that, and I would do my Lazarus meditation. I'd try and create a new reality, and I'd open my headphones and they'd still be screaming and this and that, and the message that Lazarus has been giving me is it's my fault. That if my beliefs were different, I'd have different parents. Well, anyone with a bit of intelligence will say, well, that doesn't sound right. So how do you end up with this Lazarus folk? Well, I was majorly depressed when I was 13. Majorly depressed. And Lazarus was the only friend that I had. So a non-physical entity is the only person you found that was safe. That doesn't sound like a very safe world you've grown up in. No, it isn't. So you're buying into this insanity because that's the only friend you had. It didn't seem insane. I mean, he's, goes on with all these tapes and this and that and the other, and I just thought I'm doing it wrong. We can't have that. You're not doing it wrong. I didn't do any of that channeling work, and my parents were okay. You had terrible parents. Oh. You're not a bad person. You're not a failure. Oh. But how can you do that if you don't ask? How can you have intimacy if you don't look? And how can you have love if you don't see what you purport to love? And how can you be loving if you don't track your impact on the person you want to experience well-being as a result of that impact? The amazing thing in this pattern with the high facilitators is that they never asked about their impact. I told them more than 100 times that it was lousy, but they never asked and did not respond. Well, how can you be responsible if you're not responding? How can you have a positive impact if you don't own the issue? If my clients called up and said, I trusted you, I put that plant where you said to put it, and it's withering. Well, that's between you and the plant. I recommended that, but, go deal with the plant. This is not my concern. I mean, would that client trust me again? If you got a dud computer and you take it back to Best Buy and you say, this is a dud computer, and besides, it doesn't do the things that Eric over in computer said it was going to do. I said I wanted a computer for this, it doesn't do it. Well, Eric, that's between you and Eric. Go talk to Eric. We don't, and we're not going to give you a refund or anything like that. I mean, we're the best computer company, and we're interested in top service, but, just go do that. Would you buy there again? No. So it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not loving. It's not intimate. It's not intimate if you don't look. It's not intimate if you don't ask. It's not effective. So this is the pattern. So the more you divide the self, the weaker the self becomes. And what gets to be evil is when you use trust and innocence to invite someone into a situation where, through a lack of care, preparation, training, and skill, you fragment that self and charge them energy, time, risk, vulnerability, energy, and money to come away fragmented. And then blame them for not doing it good enough. The big cost is when healers, so I'm starting to thrash around because I know this is not right. I'm going through this protocol with another shaman over and over again. He's calling the spirits of the north, calling this. He takes about between 15 and 30 minutes for every session to do all this calling in. The blue men from the north, or this from the south, or this. And I'm like, Steve, we've done this 1,000 times. You don't have a shortcut like they have in I use Photoshop, and I can press one button. If I'm going to do a 30-step process every single time, F1, drag the mouse down to here, click this, minus this 2 degree, and I want to do that to 1,000 photographs. I create a program, and I press the button, and it executes in a second what would otherwise take me 20 minutes to do. You can't do that with your shamanism. There's no protocol for that. You haven't, you're charging me $50,000 for your setup, and it's not changing. Any thoughts about that? Minimal response. I said, how many times are you going to clear my mom out of my field? Well, as often as she shows up there. Well, it's been about, 500 times so far? I'm irritable. Is that the result that should be coming from clearing your mom out of your field 500 times? Irritation? I'm irritable. I'm impatient. Get a move on. Let's have some change here. So in the same way that I became passive-aggressive with Peter to push him away from this unsafe environment, but then blamed myself. So this is the weakening, the blaming. It's happening in other areas. You know, this psychic or this person or whatever is a complete joke. He says, oh, your money will be... It's like, how do you know any of this? You guys have never been right about it. I asked you for an energy clearing. I didn't ask you for monetary readout over the next 3 months. Are you going to give me a refund if the $20,000 you just predicted without being requested for, prediction doesn't happen? Or are you going to blame me? Are you going to say I'm a fucked up seer? Or are you going to say, well, it was there in the space, saw it, but obviously you didn't want that 20,000. So this is the crazy making. Well, he's not going to give a refund. No one ever has. But is this right when real healing could take place? When any single one of the 30 practitioners, including Peter, could have done an intake form, could have cared enough to see, could have cared enough to learn, could have cared enough to make it their business. Not that I stick 6 needles into you in 15 minutes. Not that I tell you about my sex life and my wife. Not that I call in the blue men from the north and the this and that and the other. But that I actually see you. And this is the dark side of the alternative sense, because there's nothing wrong with the scientific rationale of assessing a certain amount of cause and effect, measuring results, and following protocols that work and doing questionnaires to see how much actually works. No scientist would say, I'm going to mix X amount of carbon dioxide and this amount of nitrates and this and put it in a test tube, predicting that fresh air will be created. Then I'll just send it out. I'm not going to see if it actually is created. I'm not going to change the recipe if it isn't created. I'm just going to make batches, and that's it. You have to get results. You have to get results, and you have to measure them. And that has to have something to do with the client's experience. And again, some of these shamans, they're off in their own ecstatic states. I feel absolutely nothing. If I had gone to a movie and had an ice cream cone for $10, I would have enjoyed myself more and felt more impact than X singing and 280 guides from the north and 380 guides from the south and all this. It's like, you're counting all these guides? Yeah, it's a strong number today, very strong. And I'm expanding the pattern because there's insanity everywhere. It's insane. And where does one turn? I've looked my whole life for a single person who would grab onto this and take it the way I grab onto a job and take it. I don't do contracting in California. I gave up my general contractor license after it was a learning experience. I wanted to do it for a few years and learn how houses were built, and figured I kind of knew it when my first house came in within $300 of budget a month early and with none of the stress other people were experiencing, and it was exactly what I wanted. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's a good protocol. I've learned from all the mistakes I've seen. This is the protocol. But I don't want to build houses. I hate the bureaucracy. I want to do gardens. But I still, if a client needs something, I totally prepared a multi-million-dollar home inside and out, from curtains to everything, just because the client was lazy and I thought that they would not get the value they deserved for their home. And I thought it would be fun to, just for one project, manage about 20 subs and do all this stuff and every little nuance. And, that was interesting. And I thought I did a reasonably good job and measurable results. that's not happening in a lot of this psychological healing terrain, and it could. It could. The data is out there. That's what I'm learning on my own. $250,000 in trusting experts, trusting, channeled entities just because they say they're the highest resonance to ever be there. And what I see is the real danger here, because I wasted a lot of years not growing because I stuck with Lazarus, for example, because he said he loved me, and because very intelligent and playful and warm, nice energy, great energy. Lazarus has a wonderful energy. And he said he's the highest resonance to ever contact the planet. I mean, sounds pretty neat. But everything he taught me about relationships made things work, made things worse. And when I went to high, it's like these people aren't saying they're the highest resonance from the, has ever been here. But it works. 3 workshops. I took my first level 1, 2, and 3 all in 1 month. 1, 2, and 3, back to back. I thought, great, this works. I can do this. Why doesn't Lazarus do an experiential workshop? He just monologues to people endlessly, whether it works or doesn't. He's never asked a single person, does this work? Do you want monologues or do you want experiential exercises? Do you want another workshop on the lost civilization of Atlantis? Or how about a workshop in how to build a great team to solve environmental issues? No questions. We're just the greatest resonance and we're your friend. We're not your guru. We're just going to behave like one. It's crazy making. So, no intake form in Lazarus. Lazarus never asked, are you traumatized? Are these things, are you a high risk? No. You create your own reality. You, abused teenager, are creating it all. You, an 80-year-old billionaire, are creating it all. You, an abused teenager, it's all creating it all. It's all an illusion anyways. But you still have to pay for this illusion. So how about another $600 for the workshop? We're your friend, we're not your teacher. But how about another $600 for the workshop? Because that's what friends do, isn't it? They charge each other for monologues. And there's just as much craziness in the Lazarus community. They were furious when I had some anger at Lazarus. I wrote to the channel, didn't want to hear about it. It's like, what is an individual to do who wants to be healthy in this kind of insanity? Go to Kaiser? Forget it. Forget it. What can be done, though? So the pattern is replaying, and it's replaying in little ways, throughout, the experience, whether it's a woman, that's such a painful experience, being hated and projected on, or, other people not keeping their agreements is a big thing. If you've got PTSD and you know what you need to be safe, if someone will honor this container clearly and do what they say they're going to do, you can calm down. If they don't, it's going to rev you up, and you're in 3 days to a week is going to be shot. Now, they don't want that to happen, but it does. They don't understand that it will happen because they don't ask and they don't listen, but it does. And this is the kind of thing that brings hate, that brings rage. Because it's not about, as I say, just how terrible some things are. It's about what was missed. What if Peter Sandhill had slowed down with this new drug replaying of the pattern, and slowed down and again asked the questions and said, Dane, let's go gentle. And I don't know what I'm doing here. And I see oh, okay, I'm kind of getting the mistakes I made 10 years ago. I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm not trained in this area. I see I hurt you 10 years ago. Let's do this one just as a friend. You do it the way you'd like. Don't let me push you into a high dose. Let me let go of my need to be great. I have a need. We therapists, we love saving people and da-da-da, but let me just let go of that. That's my stuff. Don't let me influence you. But I am going to make sure that you're safe. As you're starting to fall in love with me, it's like, Dane, I see some problems here. I don't know what your needs are, but I'm probably a terrible person for you. And so let me look into what could be happening here. Oh, one of the things I'm reading is people project a lot in drugs. So you may be talking with some part of yourself. Could we look at this love that you have for me from that angle? Maybe you don't need to have me in your life. Maybe you need to get in touch with something beautiful in yourself that you're seeing, because I have some of those characteristics, but you do too. And to prepare for a good drug experience, read this book on Jung and what he talks about in this. This may be a good thing. And there's a fellow that does, like, how are you prepared? And what are your resources? And how's this feeling to you? What are you needing? What do you need? Am I doing enough of it? Could I do more? Do you need help? That, of course, is all about me. That's loving me. That's attuning to me. That's loving me. That's doing what I need. That's listening. That's gathering impact. And it's responding. This is what service is. This is what healing and integration is. It's, the worst thing that you can do as a healer is to treat your patient so unethically and so poorly that they have to choose between their relationship with you and their own well-being. The reason it's the worst thing is it splinters the self. We are attached mammals. We are pack creatures. We need to belong. And in a scientific materialistic paradigm, the islands in which we can explore our spirituality and our personal growth are small. And when we form a bond with a healer that we want to trust, particularly when there's love, that word thrown around in there, it's a very dangerous word because most people don't know how to be loving to a given individual. And one's feeling of love, I want to back up this because this is a very important point. I feel lust for you, selfish. I feel a warm feeling of love when I think of you, selfish, meaning that's my feeling. Nothing to do with how you feel or what you need. I feel attached to you, selfish, I need you. And if you act out of these three things, the odds are pretty high statistically that you are going to hurt the other person. Particularly if you self-regulate, if you attune to your need around that. I need to have sex with you in this way and in that way, so that's what we should do. Get away from me. That's not I'm not in that place. I have a meeting right now. It's oh gosh. I mean, people are scared of love. They're not scared of love. They're scared of self-referenced, selfish, positive feelings being taken out at their expense. To be loving, this is the only thing that's not selfish. It has nothing to do with you feel. You may feel hate for the person. You may feel no need for them at all. You may not want to have sex with them. But you can still make a willed choice, a conscious choice, that I am going to be of service and I am going to be loving to you. And it begins with listening. Where are you? How are you feeling? What are you thinking? What's my impact? Is this a good conversation for you? What do you need? How's the volume? How's my distance? You comfortable with my eye contact? You comfortable with this kind of direct conversation? May I be of some service? How would you like to relate? Tell me a little bit about your life and what you're needing. Where's the pain points? Where are the pain points? How could someone help you in those pain points? How could someone help you? Well, I can see that I'd be a terrible person for you in this area. I can see this. But in this area, I could help you. And I want to do that from my heart because I care. I want to do that. I'm not going to charge you money. This isn't for me. I want to do this for you in the way that works for you. This is being loving. So Peter says he loves me. He's not being loving. Does he know how? Does he want to know? Is it all about him? So the real missed opportunity is in the confusion when you learn from a teacher that love is self-centeredness. There's this insanity there. This hurts the community because you've learned from your parents that love is self-centeredness. Now you're learning from your teacher on love and relationship that love is self-centeredness. So who are you going to be? Self-centered. Then that ripples out. So the big problem is what's missing, is the cost. Because, had I learned from Peter that I had PTSD, had I learned to read, had I learned that I was highly sensitive, had I learned that I had Asperger's-like tendencies, had I learned that I had unresolved issues here, had I learned how to approach them, had I learned what service was, had I learned that I could be helped and what help really looked like, how to tell that one was really helped, and read the books, which, within 10 minutes of a stranger telling me about trauma 12 years later, I was reading a book. The problem is not motivation. The problem is not money. The problem is not intelligence. The problem is ignorance on the part of professionals that are not using protocols that are worthy to be called professional. Protocols that are 50-50 or that harm are not worthy of any professional. And the number one skill we need in a professional is for that professional to know whether or not they can help or will make it worse. If a professional can't tell that, they haven't learned their number one skill that they're responsible to learn. My number one skill, I get emails all the time, can you help me with this project and none of that project? And I think, well, can you wait until October? Do you need design and installation? I do both. Am I a good person? And I try and let the person know within 5 minutes whether I'm a reasonable candidate. I've still got to go out and talk. I've still got to go out and see. And if I look and say, for this strange reason, I know another person that's much better, I need to do that. Because what we want from our professionals is to be helped or to know where we can go to be helped before we spend time, money, and risk, before we are weakened to be weakened again. So my impatience is up. My rage is up. My passive-aggressive energy is up. My confusion is up. My insanity is up. My anger, my helplessness, my self-criticism, my shame is all up because professionals are not doing their job. And I feel massively frustrated that I don't even know what I don't know. I just know it's not working. I mean, if you can look in the mirror and say, I'm more stressed than I was 10 years ago, but my life is better, meaning I have more money, my job's going better, but I'm more stressed. I'm more brittle in my relationships, but I've learned more. I've spent way more money, but my shame is higher. This is not right. Something is off here. Doesn't anyone get it? And this creates an enormous amount of disgust, distrust, distance, because it's not a safe environment. If that's happening to you in any field of your life, you are not safe. And it's not about you. It's not about you. Even in those situations where someone says, I was maddened the other day because I sat next to someone on an airplane and I asked her if she would like to create a peak experience to increase her happiness, and she said no. And I thought, that is the stupidest answer I have ever heard or could imagine. I don't want to be happier, and I don't want to create a peak experience. But what that means is that I don't understand her. On the surface, she looks like the problem. She's not. I don't understand her. Maybe she's had so much chaos, and the primary identity that feels the stablest to her is an identity of rage and competition. And she can hold on to that with her teeth. She can get into it. She knows the shape of it. And she can hang on hell or high water no matter how much life throws at her. And she can feel safe in that identity. Joy and happiness, peak experience, she doesn't feel safe in. Her primary need is for security and stability. Security through stability. And I'm inviting her to increase her pleasure while simultaneously destroying her core need. That could be what's going on. As irritating and confusing as it may be to say, okay, well, would you like me to make you miserable, or what can I do? Sometimes, yes. But it involves going deeper. It involves trusting human intelligence to go down and look at the way that we're built, to know that every adaptation, every adaptive personality, every coping mechanism is the very best thing available to that person in the lineality of the unfolding of the pattern. I'm not saying it's intelligent from the point of how to use the least amount of energy to create the most pleasure if we started with a blank slate. But people can be really wounded and hurt in this world. And until we understand the source and the evolution, until we validate the intelligence, the innate, beautiful intelligence of a human being and how they've evolved, we can't help them. And that takes time. Not sitting there on a couch doing 8 years of Freudian analysis and a good questionnaire, a good app. I'm writing one right now because I'm so fed up and it's so obvious to me. And no one has given me this questionnaire. So I'm writing it and it will be available. You want it? You got it. When we are blind to what we are blind to, when we don't know what we don't know, when we don't begin to know there are things that we don't know that we don't know, people get wrapped up in cellophane and smothered and buried and cast off. We cannot go on without these lost parts of self coming back. The world that breaks us into 1,000 pieces and hides them off in different burial sites cannot heal, cannot learn, cannot lift to the new paradigm its own survival requires without bringing these pieces back. And the masked and hidden butchers, those people standing in the dark in the graveyard who shoveled soil, not knowing who they were burying, they must be exposed. Because then, maybe, they can start bringing back the pieces in their own life that parents, friends, and a social structure that shamed them for being who they are have cast off, have bribed them with hundreds of thousands of dollars to throw away. Be this person. Be this person, not that one that you are. Be this, and if you have to drink and drug and eat to fit into my box so I can use you in the way I want to use you, be that one. Be that one. I have no time for you. If you cannot be fixed in a few moments and give me my fix, I have more important things to do with important people, more important than you. This is our story. This is our world. And you, like I, can tell your truth in a video, in a book, screaming out words that no one wants to hear, but you can speak nonetheless. In meditation, honoring the ghosts who have been buried and who haunt you with their blessing. Those energetic fields and shapes that await, unable to be killed just because the physical form has been ripped away. You, my friend, the forgotten, banished on the outside of the city gates, you, my friend, are the answer to all our problems. And yet, for so long we have not known your message, your truth, or how you got there. You have been blamed, lied to and shamed for so long for problems you did not create. And yet you stand there waiting with your gifts outside our city gates, waiting for an intelligence strong and beautiful enough to come calling, to invite you in. When you come, we will all see you for the first time. We will know in your eyes, the Savior we have been looking for and cursing at the same time. We need to know these things because we have ripple effects out into a world that we end up causing without understanding. When we carry a pattern of dis-ease, we ripple out a pattern of dis-ease. The crime that has been done is not just to me, it is to all those people touched by me. And the gifts that I have been received, the gifts that I have been given, is not just to me, but all the many people I have been touching and sharing in different ways to the best of my ability. We are human. We all make mistakes. But we cannot heal and forgive a crime that is still going on to an infant wrapped up, unable to breathe, screaming silently in an eternal moment. Take the baby out of the pressure cooker. Understand the wound. Begin healing. Begin making amends to that infant. Let the cries be heard. Then there's plenty of time for forgiveness, and it will come naturally when the wound is healed.